Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter podcast. Today, I'm joined by Manoj Tandon. Manoj, how you doing, my friend?
Very good, Thomas. And how are you?
Good, I'm good. Thank you. Sure, Manoj, last time we spoke, I think I was having a bit of a down day. And you know what? You were talking to me about some stuff about business and coming through and mindset, and you gave me some good advice when we were on a Zoom call a few weeks back. So I'm looking forward to this one, mate. I think there's a lot
Uh,
you can help out with.
I will try, but keep in mind this advice is free, and you know what they say about free advice. So,
I'll keep a lookout for your invoice via email after the show, shall I? So, look, I'm going to do you a bit of an intro. And if I get anything wrong, feel free to correct me afterwards, Marge, if you like. But
sure.
essentially, back in the 90s, started off as a structural engineer. Then you went on to be a part of PTC, which again was in the 90s. You started off as a consultant and you progressed all the way up to sector manager of the Americas. You were then in the early 2000s a senior account manager for Framework Technologies. Then you went on to be a senior account executive centric software. Then you progressed on with Rolter Americas, started off as an account director, then a regional director, and progressed all the way to senior director. Currently, you are a member of Forbes Business Development Council, and you are also currently a member of the Board of Advisors of Ohio IT Association. And also, you are currently COO of Dark Rhino Security Labs. Welcome to the show. Did I get that about right?
I think you got that about right. The only thing I would change on that is I was an aero engineer. And yes, I did work on structures way back when. This is all during the era of the Soviet Empire. So
Ooh.
it's a long time ago. And aerospace was a passion of mine. And that was probably the only gig I did that was planned. After that, it's been unplanned. But boy, that's a long journey. Thank you for reminding me of that, Thomas.
Yeah, if you could tell me a little bit where I always like to start is I've done you a bit of an intro, but if you could tell me and the listeners who you are, what you're up to, and what you get up to on a day to day basis, my friend, if that's okay.
Yeah. I think you captured a good chunk of it in the intro as far as who I am. I did start off life as an aerospace engineer, and that was a passion. And that's something I would probably advise all your listeners is find a passion. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but whatever it is, find that passion. And I had found a passion with that. And then so many people, I got married and the Soviet Empire fell apart and I needed a little bit of cash. And I'm not ashamed to say that. I went looking for a different line of work, and PTC out of Boston became the fourth largest software company in the world, actually. And I was lucky enough to be a part of that rise of that firm and really learn a lot about running a business, understanding various aspects of marketing, sales, product development, product management, all kinds. It was a once in a lifetime shot, and it really had a profound impact on me. And I'll say after that, everything was pretty much unplanned. Things happened and it led from one thing to another, as you described in my intro. And ultimately, a friend of mine, he was starting this company along with another friend. And it was a cybersecurity project, and I had a perfectly good, legitimate gig going, and I did something crazy. Say, yeah, to hell with that. Let's try something totally untrue, untested, I should say, and untried, and let's give that a go. And that's how I ended up at Dark Rhino Security. It's the first venture I've been a part of where it's been our own money that's on the line. The other ones that you mentioned, a lot of those were startup companies, but they were funded by professional venture capitalist firms. Dark Rhino has been a totally different animal because it's our nickel. And if there's anything that clarifies the mind, that will clarify the mind.
Yeah, definitely. And Manoj, I think if I remember right, I think this is your fifth startup. So
Yes.
you're probably getting pretty good at this now.
No, what I'm getting good at is being comfortable and being in very uncomfortable situations, if that makes any sense. Okay. What any company is a unique experience with its own unique set of challenges. And I don't want to do another startup. I don't. It's not for the faint of heart. And I think the business side of it is actually the easy side of it. And it is the entrepreneurship is very much about mental strength, and you're betting on yourself, right? And no matter what you do, it's going to be a ton of work. And there will be good things and there will be very bad things. And you will have to manage your way through that. And what's going to determine your success or failure to a large degree is your mental outlook on things.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's so true. And I always mention this, but I think since remote working, the mental strength is even more important and significant because naturally, if you're on your own and you're in that remote environment, do you think it's harder?
I think in a remote environment, see, I'll tell you, I've worked from home since the year 1999. Having done it so long, for me, I find the office a little bit of a waste of time because there's a lot of wasted time. I don't want to talk to the cooler talk and what happened on the weekend and whatnot. Those are fun things, and I can see there needed social elements there, especially if you're fresh and you really want to get prove yourself and be in front of other people. But at some point, you're like, let's get down to business. And if you can develop that mental discipline, working in an isolated environment, as long as there's a clear description of the results you need to produce, you can probably produce those results in half the time versus working in the office.
Mm. Mm.
But you
Yeah,
have to
no.
have the discipline, and that
Mm.
will take time to develop because it's very easy to get distracted.
You've mentioned a few things here that I just want to unpack. So you've talked about uncomfortable being uncomfortable. You've talked about this not being for the faint-hearted. You've talked about the mental and the mindset aspect almost being more important and more substantial than the actual technicalities of running a business and the discipline of working in a remote environment. I think there's some really important things there to get into. If I'm listening now and I'm thinking, do you know what? A lot of this is resonating with me. I'm going through tough times. I'm mentally finding it hard. I've set up my own business. Maybe I'm 2, 3 years in. I'm thinking, what have I done? I'm maybe doubting myself. I don't quite know. Any kind of tip. What do you do when things are tough, when you've got to pull on those resilience levers internally? What advice and tips and hints have you got for the listeners that are maybe
Oh boy, how
feeling
much
like
time
this?
do you got for that one? That question in itself can take quite a bit of time to really dissect. I'll tell you, there's a few things there. And first thing is there's a friend of mine, actually. He also happens to be my business partner. Sent me a quote yesterday. I'm going to share that with you because I think it's very appropriate to what we're discussing here. It's from a gentleman by the name of Josh Billings. And what Josh said was half the troubles of this life can be traced to saying yes too quickly and not saying no soon enough. The mind is a finicky thing, and you got to be cautious about listening to it all the time because it is going to, depending on your personal makeup, it is going to run its wild course and it will take you for a ride. So you have to be able to have a sense of objectivity and you must be able to distance yourself from your mind. And that is a skill. Now, it takes time to learn it, but anybody can do it. There's no superpower involved with it. And it's really having a sense of objectivity. I had a mentor once a gentleman that I worked for a long time ago, and he said it in a different way. He said, all companies are bad unless proven otherwise. Every idea is shit unless proven otherwise. All right. And there's a lot, and that's not, if you met this guy, he was a kind of a crazy fellow, but a very wonderful human being. I won't embarrass him because he's a very senior executive now in a very large defense company. But the context of that is not negativity. The context of that is you really to look at things objectively. Don't fall in love with something because that's where you get in trouble. When I say don't fall in love with something, that excludes your personal relationships. Please, that does not include wives, girlfriends, significant others. I am not advocating that. I want to make that very clear. But when it comes to the material thing of a business or a concept, whether you developed it or somebody else developed it, or don't fall in love with it. Don't. You might think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. but the market has its own way of deciding things for you. And take that objective feedback, because it doesn't care about your ego. It doesn't care what your mind is thinking. It doesn't care how much you think your idea is absolutely brilliant. The market is the market, and it's going to drive you. And either you're going to listen to it or you're going to blow up, because you're not going to win that. You're not going to move that juggernaut. You're going to take advantage of a market situation, but you're not going to be able to just outright take it on head on and say the market's dumb or stupid. My idea is the greatest thing. And this is how you get into these mental cycles when you start falling in love with these concepts. You don't want to do that. The other thing is, and I hate the term hobby, but you got to have something that you have a passion for that is not related to the endeavor that you are involved with, whatever that endeavor may be. And people say, well, you should have a hobby. No, a hobby to me is something you tinker around with in your garage or your basement or something like that. This is a passion of yours, whether you find that passion in literature, you find that passion in art, you find that passion in sport, whatever the case may be. Because when you're in a bad way, and I don't know of any entrepreneur that's not been in a bad way at some point in their journey, you must be able to step out of the scene and step into a different scene, calm the mind down, distract it. Distraction is even a bad word. Calm it down and engage it in something that is driven by your heart. And it is in those moments of calmness when you're not thinking about it that you'll find magic in answers to whatever is actually bothering you. I'm oversimplifying things, but that is an approach, because your mind, I always say, it always lies to you. This is the issue I have with people who are always saying think positive. Yes, you shouldn't be Debbie Downer, right? The sky is not always falling. But if you are also overly optimistic, then you can tread the line of being delusional at times, because you have fallen in love with something, you don't even realize it, and you're arguing with a condition will never be overcome, right? There's a way to overcome it, but not necessarily in the way that you're thinking about it. So distract yourself, engage it in something, and you'll be surprised. Thomas Edison, one of the things he used to do, from what I understand, was some of his best ideas, he would actually sit in a chair and try and find that hypnagogic state, right? That transition from wakefulness to sleepiness. And in that, he found some of his brightest ideas. So every entrepreneur has their own thing. For you, it might be a golf course, Thomas. I don't know.
Yeah. I used to play a lot of golf when I was younger, mate, but just not so much these. It's time consuming, but very good for switching off.
Yeah. I think there was someone who really excelled. I'm sure you've heard of Beethoven. And he has one of my favorite quotes out there, that don't only practice your art, but force your way into its secrets, for it and knowledge can raise men to the divine. And there's a lot to be said about that. And this is the entrepreneur's mindset. You got to have that. And you got to have a lot of people. Thomas, I'm sure you've met them. You hear people at the club or at a bar or in a restaurant or at a party. They always talk about they don't like their job, or they want wealth, they want riches, you can just fill in dash after want, whatever that want may be. Are they genuinely willing to put the effort in to achieve that want? And because they have to step into that world of getting into an extremely uncomfortable set of situations. And if they're looking for a steady paycheck, the house with the pool stays, the kids go to a private school, all that is going to be maintained, and you're going to be an entrepreneur for the first time, it's not going to work. It might work for the second time if you were successful the first time. But
Yeah.
if you're starting on or contemplating this journey, I would love for your listeners to know that they must understand that they're going to face a set of challenges that are not clarified in a business plan, which is the business school way to entrepreneurship. They're like, develop an idea, develop a business plan, do market studies. etc. As soon as you start engaging the market, all that's going to go right out the window because it's going to tell you what it wants. And that is going to present a lot of mental challenges. You might have the business acumen in finance, you might have the business acumen in sales, and all those disciplines that are required to run a business. But do you have the mental strength to face incredibly challenging situations that will impact your personal life? And there's no way around that. And that will impact the people that work with you. Can you get past that in a coherent fashion? That's the question you need to ask. And I don't think anyone can answer it. But if you have the heart to take that challenge on, you're started your entrepreneurial journey.
I'm gonna push on that in a minute because I want to hear a bit more about that reality of what it's actually like, and if people are going through it now, I want them to hopefully feel a bit better and inspired, and if people are thinking about going through it, I want them to know the reality. But just to summarize, so half the trouble in life occurs from saying yes too quickly and not being able to say no quick enough.
That's right.
Love is saying love is blind. If you fall in love with an idea, even if it's your idea and it was seemingly good, don't go down that road of being blind to it too much. Have a bit of a reality check. Hobbies outside of work, the mind's got to decompress. Essentially, if you just go full throttle all the time, essentially the kind of engine's gonna burn out. So have that kind of time away to forget about things and let the ideas flow and so on and so forth. So they're the
That's right.
kind of main things to summarize for the listeners. But just on that last point, can you tell us about some really tough times, sometimes that really tested you? For people looking in now, mate, it looks pretty good, the success you've had, and we read those accolades out at the start of the show, so it all looks good now. But well, I know it won't have always been like that. Can you tell me a bit about how
Oh,
tough it's been and how you coped?
it's been a lot of things. Any business that was starting out, we had our challenges with how are we going to make this payroll? And there's more than 2 dozen people relying on you to do that and their families, right? You, you got to mortgage the house. You got to do X. You got to do what you have to do to a degree. We've had situations where during COVID, we did lose a chunk of clients because there were some elements to on site work in our business, and no one could be on site anywhere in COVID. And it had a dramatic impact on us from a cash and revenue perspective in the negative way. There have been some very difficult times, and there's still some things that are going on. We look at, we're a services company, we're not a product company. And if you look at all the venture capitalists out there, to a large degree, not all, but to a large degree, they're all about funding products, not about services organizations. So when you're trying to grow something and you're in a market that really doesn't want to invest in you, but you're at that place where you can start hyper growth, how do you do that? So there's all these challenges that are there, but I can promise you this, that there's solutions to every one of these things. And they weren't the readily obvious answers. The readily obvious answer, well, let's go get an investor. Let's go to the bank. Wrong. Okay. In fact, I'll say whatever that path of least resistance is that your mind is going to take you down, that's bullshit. I'll tell you, that's going to be the road to nowhere. But hey, you know what? Go down that way and see where it leads, because you have to have the experience of it. Me telling it is not going to make it any different. And we found some very creative solutions as to how to address these challenges. And we're continuing to find creative solutions, right? Thomas, we have, if you look at globally, we're a managed security services provider right now, a dark Rhino, right? That's what we're doing. We're an MSSP. That's how the broad analyst base would classify us. There's probably 4,500 globally. There's 1,500 in North America. 99.9% are glorified VARs. They're pimping out technology of some kind or another, right? And if you go to everybody's website, they must have used Chat GPT to write it, because it's all the same shit. said a different way. I guarantee you, randomly throw a dart at a cybersecurity services provider, and I guarantee you'll find the words risk on there in some way, shape, or form. And they all reduce risk. They all provide the greatest technologies. They all provide the greatest services. All of this. To me, it's our space is akin to what the auto industry was like in the early 1900s in the United States. There was a time when we had 400 auto manufacturers. How many do we have left today?
Yeah.
So the cybersecurity industry is going to go through that same consolidation. But in that, when you talk about challenges, how do you stand out? How do you, and especially when you don't have the marketing budget of a CrowdStrike or an IBM or an AT&T or people who, for whom 10, 15 million in marketing is like you and I spending $3 on a cup of coffee somewhere. Yeah, no big deal. We'll just advertise over the Super Bowl. We can do that. And so you have to stand out in that. And in case we are differentiating ourselves in that we're offering something that's a premium and we're backing it up with real money. And we're saying that if you have something bad happen, two things will take place. One, we're on the hook financially to cover the loss, and your cyber insurance company, we're going to lower the cost of your cyber insurance because our money is used to pay off your retention or your deductible, as lay people would say it, on their policy. And we're going to offer a much higher deductible. So if you had a $10,000 deductible, now you have a $50,000 deductible. So you have a lower policy. You have a partner, not a vendor, because we have a vested interest in your outcome. We don't want to write that check. And we're contractually obligated to write that check. And we have funded our own insurance company to make sure that we're able to write that check. And the federal government is ensuring that we can write that check. But we're a partner to you now. So how many businesses can you work with that actually care about what happens and will actually get you all the financial backstops in the worst of circumstances? And that's our differentiating value, right? And we're providing something at a premium point. Now, are we a fit for everybody? Absolutely not. But we know what our market niche is, and that is what we're pursuing. And that's just a real example of, and you might be in the business of recycling electronic components, or you might be in the business of, I don't know, running chain stores of some kind. Whatever the case is, there has to be some differentiating factor there that you're going to bring to the table that is going to be uniquely identified with you, that will make you who you are, and you being your organization, not you as a person, right? And that is something that you need to really think about before you step into the ring.
Yeah, I really like what you said about not being a fit for everyone as well. And that kind of ties in quite nicely with half the trouble in life is when people say, you say yes too quickly. But essentially, if you say yes to everything, you just end up pleasing no one, running around like a madman or a madwoman and just getting nowhere. I've learned it from recruitment is you've got to set your stall out, have a set of non-negotiables and go, this is what we do. This is what we're great at. If it's that, I'm sorry, but it took me a while to get to that stage. I don't know about you, but it's great advice.
Yeah, look, in our world, and I'm not just going to say our world, anybody who's listening that's involved with services, and I don't care if you're a caterer, you're a restaurant, you're a cybersecurity firm, or you're a consulting company of some kind, doesn't really matter to me. There's only three things you can be, right? In that world. You can be a commodity, which is what a lot of our competition is, and a lot of people's in their relative industries, they'll find that. You can be a service, somebody that is good. And do you really stand out? Not, but there's so much business out there that you're able to take your little piece of the pie and you're quite content with it. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Or the third thing is you can be an experience. So if you're choosing to be an experience, which is what we're trying to be, then it's a totally different ballgame. But then you realize that there's a lot of people in the market that are buying commodities and services. You've excluded that. But at the same time, you look at if you walk into a Ferrari dealership or a Rolls Royce dealership and you ask the guy, can you give me a discount? What do you think is going to happen there?
I laugh.
Yeah. Be like, why are you here? You go down to the Chevy dealership. I'm sure they got a sale running. If you, and so they've carved out their market and you stick with it and you let then the market tell you what you're doing and what you're doing terribly wrong and make the necessary correction. And then there's the element of lady luck there, Thomas. 1% of all of this is lady luck. I can't emphasize that enough. You can be the smartest guy, you can be Elon Musk, but if lady luck doesn't play her hand, you're going to have a difficult time of it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that goes back to what you said at the top of the call, which is the mindset and kind of the resilience piece, because stuff does just go wrong. Manoj, I'm taking notes as you're speaking here, and I'm literally looking at about 4 or 5 different directions because there's loads of little things you're saying
Just go ahead.
I want to jump on. So, do you know what I wanted to ask you? So, on the business side, like setting your stall out, having a niche or a niche and staying within it, being really clear about what you are and being able to articulate that to the market and stick to it. And you used the example of the Ferrari dealership. You talked about using your own money and stuff like that. I think there's great advantage. I can see advantages and disadvantages to that. If you're PE or VC backed or using someone else's money, you're restricted in what you can't do. So obviously, if you're using all your own funds, you've got full autonomy and control over what you do, and that must be amazing. If you're in that phase, if I'm listening and I'm in the phase of I want to set my stall out, I am using my own money, but I need to get money in as well to keep stuff going. When you talked about sectioning off a huge portion of the market, does that require a lot of discipline to turn stuff down and really stick to your guns in that way?
It does. It very much does. There's going to be some loneliness for you as an entrepreneur because you will also be told by your friends, your mentors, business books, all kinds of things that maybe you should adjust this, maybe you should adjust that. But if your goal is to be an experience and to be a market disruptor, if you're a fast follower, it's an easy game because you're just following whatever's already been done. And that's a perfectly legit strategy. There's no harm with that. Right. But if you're going to be a disruptor and you're an innovator in the market space, I can tell you it's going to be hard because it's very hard for people to understand your vision or have context to what your vision is. Once the market starts buying your vision, it becomes readily obvious. You look at Steve Jobs, right? Everybody looks at him and they're like, look at what a success Apple is today. Well, Apple wasn't always a success, and it's had some colossal failures in its time. But he always stuck to a vision, right? Elon Musk has stuck to a vision. And one thing that I will say that in all these instances, you look at all the great entrepreneurs, and that's who I would study because those guys, go look at Thomas Edison, go look at Steve Jobs, go look at Elon Musk, go look at Larry Ellison, Bill Gates. If you want an education in entrepreneurship, study the masters of it. Look at Warren Buffett, study these people because their story will tell you what elements of it you need to pick up in your own story. And those guys, all of them, the lowest common denominator for them is that they didn't do it for the money. Okay. Yeah. And that is a failure point with being goal oriented. And people are like, well, that guy is an idiot. He just said you shouldn't be goal oriented. No, if your goal is money, you're going to find it very difficult to stay motivated and engaged and find the creative solutions to the many problems that are going to arise. It's just not that motivational unless you're that odd investment banker. That's all you ever dream about. Those people are out there too, in which case, go for it. But these great people wanted to do something that was bigger than themselves and put something out there that bettered what was the current state of affairs.
Yeah, mate.
No, and so think about that. So when you're starting on this thing and you want to set up your own stall, if you're in that place, why are you doing that? And you should have that before you even find a name for the company. Is what is it that you want to make a difference with? And that has to be your guiding light. And it has to be something that drives you, that's an inner passion that can be done better. And you want to bring that, because money will be a byproduct of it. If you're successful, you're going to have the money. That's not going to be the issue. The issue, though, is, are you doing something that is meaningful to you and meaningful to the market, and it betters all of us in some way, shape, or form? And you could see that with, look at Steve Jobs, single-handedly changed the music industry, changed the camera industry, changed so many things. Look at what Bill Gates has done. It used to be about the hardware, and it wasn't until Bill came around that now it's, look at software and look at the entire ecosystem of software that's out there. So these guys have all done something pretty spectacular, but it's much bigger than they are.
I think if you're mission and values led, decision making becomes quite easy. If you just say, if you chase somebody, it's like, oh, you'll be jumping there, jumping there, you'll be jumping all over the place. If you go, this is what we're doing, I think it provides a bit of kind of clarity, and this is where we're.
Yeah, then you can be focused. So if you have that, mission is going to drive focus. Focus is going to channel your energy. Energy drives your thoughts. Thoughts are going to deliver to you outcomes based on your actions. It's a straight chain. If you don't have that mission of what you genuinely think can happen. And there was a gentleman, Donnie Deutsch, I think he wrote it's a book called The Big Idea. And it's a business book. And he talks about people who had very simple ideas, whether it was opening a donut shop or opening a coffee store or an insurance agency. It doesn't matter. Things you wouldn't think of as earth-shattering, but these people were amazingly successful in these endeavors, which the common person would think, what's the big deal with this stuff? They did have a big idea on how they wanted to execute it and what they really brought to the table that market had not yet seen. And they delivered on those goods. And it's an easy book to read. I would absolutely suggest people do that. Another one I would, before I even forget, there's a couple books out there that I always put on my reading list. And funny enough, none of them have to do with, no, there's actually one that does have to do with cybersecurity, that people who are interested in this topic. But as far as entrepreneurship goes, there's a very old book called The Goal. I think it was Eliyahu Goldratt was the author of it. It's a very interesting book, easy to read. You could probably polish it off in a weekend, but it really tells you about the constraints in a business and creative thinking and how to address constraints, the ideas around that. I would say another one for entrepreneurship that I have really found quite useful is Paul Coelho's The Alchemist. And people would be like, what does that book have to do with business? Nothing, except for it talks a lot about the inner journey. And that is going to be the same inner journey you're going to experience as an entrepreneur. And there's some guideposts in there that might drive your thought processes, which will drive your actions, as we've said, which drive outcomes. So you want to do that. And then for those who are interested in cybersecurity, David Sanger wrote a great book called The Perfect Weapon. I'd encourage people to read that. These are easy books to read. These are not technology heavy, boring. This is stuff you can read on a plane, on a bus, on a train, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think as well, you talked about in a conversation, they're just essential for anything, whether you're starting a business, whether you're getting your next certification or whatever it might be. Those conversations, they're so important.
They very much are. And, find a mentor, and not mentors, because you need to find people that respect you and you respect them. And that will not be a judge on your ideas and thoughts, but that can just give you maybe an alternative, objective feedback. There was such a thing, someone who could totally compartmentalize risk and become totally objective about it is probably going to be a brilliant business person, because they will not be in love with something. They're going to be constantly assessing the situation, seeing what's there, and they're not going to be, oh, that was my idea, therefore it must be good. No, they'll be like, yeah, that was my idea and it seemed good, but it's shitty now and we better change course. and this is what we're going to do. Very hard. It's really easy to say, but if it's your baby, it's really hard to do that.
Manoj, what you've just said there, you remind me of one of my friends who's done really well in business, and he sat me down once and he said, "Tom, he goes, if you can get over your losses in this life quickly, you're going to do very, very
Oh,
well."
yeah.
And that's exactly what you just said. It's easier said than done, but
It's,
worth mentioning.
I know the advice is trivially simple. The execution of it is exponentially difficult because you're often dealing with big egos and you're often dealing with people who think the world is the way they think it should be. It just is a natural part of people who are looking to break away from being a cog in the wheel and creating their own wheel. It's a natural progression for those folks. But there's also those very things that are causing you to break away from being a cog in the wheel are giving you strength at one journey, but can be your poison in another part of it. And you need to know how to control it. Otherwise, they will control you and it will be a failure. And maybe that's not a bad thing. I've had failures. Things go wrong until you experience that. And it's a humbling experience.
How important is it being humble? So you mentioned egos there and used the word humble. I've just found over the years from really senior business leaders like yourself, business owners, I tend to find if I connect with people at the top, they're some of the most humble guys and girls I ever meet, and I don't expect them to be. I'm thinking, oh God, this person owns, or this person owns it, But I tend to find people that have had ultra success tend to be pretty humble. Would you agree with that? It's
Yeah,
kind of
I
a
would.
quality.
There's a big element of that in a lot of people who are very successful, probably because they've reached success through a series of failures, which is not an uncommon thing. I don't want anyone to think that I started this business and now it failed. That's okay. It happened. Go out, have a drink, maybe drink the bottle, get up in the morning, stop crying, put your big boy pants on and do it again. And you go through that a series of times and there will be a humbling. Now, it's contradictory because you do need to have a little bit of an ego. You do need to have that mindset of, I think the market needs this and I see an opportunity and I'm going to drive to it. The difference is that as you mature in that journey, you're going to very quickly pick up on the market signals that say, all right, you thought this was great, and it still may be great, but there's some adjustments that you need to make. And you're willing to listen to people who are advising you about those adjustments and not getting hung up. Wasn't my idea, so I don't care. I'm not going to do it. That's a trap. So again, something that proved to be a strength can become your poison. And you really got to be able to, gets back to what I said earlier. You have to be able to distance yourself from your own mind. Figure that out, whatever that journey for you is, whether it's a round of golf, it's art,
Yeah.
it's music, whatever it is, you have to find a way to be able to disengage the mind once it's on its runaway track, settle it down, and you'll find answers to your troubles. You will. It's going to happen.
Thanks much. I like what you say about as well, like you listen to the market. You talked as well about loads of companies being in the security market at the minute. The market will level that out as well, because there'll be a lot of people in the market that think they want to do it, and then it'll get testing and they'll drop off, and it'll just really, the market will almost weed any pretenders out and all that kind of stuff. It sorts itself out, doesn't it?
It will. It absolutely will. And it'll do it brutally. The market has no feelings and it will do it. And our market is ripe for it. I think the security market is absolutely set up for a consolidation, and you're going to see it over the next several years. Cybersecurity is not about tech, which is what it's marketed as tech, though. So go figure that. It's about people. It's a people problem. Over 90% of it is a people problem. It is not a technology problem. If we could get people to behave more appropriately, you could solve a huge number of cybersecurity issues without doing much more than some basic IT hygiene that needs to be done. Again, people always follow the path of least resistance, and bad guys take advantage of that psychology. And that is something that's actually never taught. I'm on the board at Slippery Rock University in their computer science department. And one of the things that I hope one of those guys listens to this, because I've been harping on them for a while, is that they have to bring the psychology of the bad people and the bad actors into the curriculum and So if you are setting up a cybersecurity defense in-depth strategy, then you must necessarily understand what the mindset of your adversary is, and then look at the human behaviors that are going to be advantageous to that mindset of the adversary. Address that problem first, and then the gaps that are left, you apply technology to. You're going to have a killer cybersecurity program based on defense in depth. Whereas if you just say, my IT budget this year is $1 million and I got to do a firewall refresh and I'm going to buy this doohickey and some shit over here from whatever, you'll be in the land of mediocrity. Now, you'll be better off than somebody that has nothing. And I'm sure that was heresy, what I just stated, but it's true, whether people like it or not. Address the people first and the process gaps, the mindset gaps. Understand what they are. Then you go looking for technological fixes, which is why cybersecurity is not a one size fits all. It'll be unique to the culture of the organization and the business in which they engage. You won't have one common way of executing it.
But every time I talk to you, honestly, I'm not just saying, you do lift me up every time I speak to you. Like, I had a bit of a rough day today, and I had a bit of a stressful day when we was, and your energy lifts me up. So how do you keep like this? What keeps you going?
Oh, I want to know, is the journey that we're on and what our thoughts are, can it be done? I just want to know. Can it be done? Is it real? Our thing is, we want to change the way cybersecurity is looked at and executed, and genuinely try and make people safe. And the question is, are they going to listen? Are our ideas any good? And to me, we keep getting validation from our customers, and we get validation from various sources. Actually, the market is the biggest one, our customers. And it's even though it's an uphill drive, the people who are on that journey are so loyal to us. We know it has legs, and we would dishonor those people by not going forward. And you got to remember that. So it's not about us. It's not about Dark Rhino Security. It's not about Manoj. It's about our clients. And we, in fact, instantiated that. Instead of writing out a big mission statement, we recently rebranded our logo. And if you look at it now, it says Rhino is spelled with 2 I's. And people like, these guys probably were drinking too much Kool-Aid, and they don't know how to spell check. We've gotten all kinds of comments back. It's, what's wrong with you? But it was done very intentionally. Spelling Rhino with 2 I's, it's IINO. And that's invested in outcomes. And that is what we are all about. And that's what motivates and drives us. And that's why we get up every morning to do this. And that is about our customers. It's not about us.
Yeah, cool, Manoj. I want to ask you a few things about leadership. I want to ask you about your remote working and discipline advice, and those books you mentioned as well. For everyone listening, we will put them in the show notes. So I'll probably be pestering you, mate, on LinkedIn afterwards for
No problem. No problem.
the links. But yeah, just another thing as well. I'm just going to go back about 5 minutes. But when we're talking about mission and values and it making life easier because you've just got a set of non-negotiables that you stick to, and the compound effect of just having that laser focus because you know what your missions are, you know what your values are. I'm thinking about that from a hiring perspective as well. If someone walks through the door and they're fantastic, but they don't align with your values, maybe again, I think it just makes everything just so much easier and streamlined, whether it's from a customer acquisition perspective or a hiring perspective or whatever it might be. So I think there's loads of benefits to that. And on the leadership front, Manoj, any tips, hints, advice there that you've learned over the years that you can maybe compress down into an answer for us here and now for the listeners?
A lot of relevant things you learned in kindergarten, believe it or not. Treat people with dignity. And that's sometimes very hard to do too, especially things have really gone south. But you really always should treat people with kindness and dignity all the time, because that will come back to you. Leadership is not attained, it's by a positional power or title. That is a mistake I see a lot of leaders make. Leadership is an outgrowth of respect, and respect has to be earned. And you have to be firm. You have to have a laser focus, but at the same time, keep that respect for the team, for them as people and get their feedback. Treat them well. Realize that you yourself are replaceable. If you got hit by a bus, your organization would continue on tomorrow. Having that thought in mind is not negative. It's actually a means and a mechanism by which you can set in motion things that your team needs to understand, from goals, from directives, from processes, that they can become self-sufficient. And that's something that you need to do as a leader, is you need to make these people self-sufficient. For some people, that's impossible. If you're a micromanager, you are really going to suck to work for, and you are probably going to not be a very good entrepreneur. That being said, there are some successful micromanagers out there, but if you look at their evolution as how they got into that position, it wasn't a journey that I'm talking about, where they decided that they didn't want to be a cog in the wheel anymore. Usually they had some super capability to put them in that position first, and then they started their journey. But you really must do that. You got to trust your people and treat them well and treat them with kindness and set in motion processes, make sure their mission is clear and that they can execute it on your own. One of my business partners is an ex-Marine. And one of the things in the Marine Corps that he harps about is that everybody on the team always knew what the mission was. So if the guy next to you got shot and killed, that didn't stop the mission. And everybody knew what the commander's intent was. It's very important that intent be understood. After that, you let the team loose in the field, and they're going to do what they know how to do. They're professionals. You have to develop that mindset in your organization, and then you will be a really good leader. People will follow you. They are going to trust you, right? You have to allow for an environment where if people fail, it's okay. Now, I'm not advocating that they just keep failing. Then you obviously have the wrong person in the wrong role. But human beings, we are naturally not perfect, and we never will be. So people are going to make mistakes, and some of your best employees may result from those mistakes. So before you berate somebody or discipline them or make an example out of something, really think about that and say, you know what? This was a legitimate mistake. And instead of throwing them under the bus, I'm going to give them a little bit more responsibility, because that is going to show that we still have faith in them and they will be motivated, hopefully. If after that, at some point, you always have bad hires, as Thomas, you're in that business. But if we're talking about leadership, it's very easy to fire someone. It's extremely difficult to have the mindset to bring out the best in someone. And that is what your goal is as a leader. So you're trying to bring the best forward. If you've done, that's the best you're going to get. Nobody can do more than the best that they're able to do. That is their top level of performance, whatever level that is.
Yeah. It goes back to what you said at the start, which was the dignity and respect for your team. It ties back in with that quite nicely. So, yeah.
Yeah, you have to. I've seen like some of the best mentors I've had, people who've taught me. They were very aggressive people, actually, in their craft, but they were masters of their craft, and they knew what they were doing very well. But they were also gentle in their guidance and offered a lot of encouragement to fly on your own. There's a saying, no one can guarantee an outcome, Thomas. Nobody. You're Warren Buffett. You're not going to be able to guarantee an outcome. What you can do is set up processes and measure that process properly. And hopefully, if you did that right, the outcomes will be exactly where you wanted them to be in the first place. So you got to look at the process that drives the behavior of people in your organization, processes that drive those behavior, and address those. Are you measuring those? Is your commander's intent clear? Are you clear in your directive? Are you flip-flopping? Are you changing your story on a day-to-day basis? Because if you're changing your story, I can assure you your team's going to be totally lost. Is there an objective way by which you are measuring outcomes that everybody has signed on with? And in a startup, that's really easy to do, because you don't have a mega corporation. You don't have 5,000 employees. You don't need committee actions. You've got 5 people, sit around the damn table, come up with what you're going to do, how you're going to measure it, and you're all going to agree that if this isn't the outcome, we're going to make a change. And that's another part, is that people don't realize it's not good to be the best at everything. There is some inefficiency that is needed in the organization for overall efficiency to be achieved. And that's very counterintuitive. In mathematics, it's akin to, for those of you who are engineers and scientists out there, local optimization doesn't equal optimization of the whole. So as a leader, though, you have to keep those notions in mind and look at that. And then your decisions are going to be such that people are going to see coherence of thought, credibility in statement, right? Directed intention and loyalty to them as a makeup of you as a person. You don't need a CEO, CFO, COO, VP, whatever title. You will become the leader of that group naturally, because people are going to look to you for direction.
Yeah. And that cohesive team of people, that's powerful. Compound effect of that all working. Yeah.
That's how you move a mountain, Thomas.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not doing it by yourself. You need some people.
I just want to come on to the remote working. You've got a lot of experience working remotely. There'll be people out there that are new to remote working still. Really, it's only been fully prevalent really since COVID. There was some before, but obviously since COVID, it's really booted off. Tips, advice, potential. You talked about being disciplined when you're working remotely. What kind of final thoughts have you got on remote working?
On that, a few things. Set up a dedicated space. You got to have that. And it's got to be understood by your entire family that when you're in that space, that's your space. Okay. If they really need to reach you, have a mechanism by which they can tell you that this is an emergency and whatever. But you have to have a dedicated space. The other part is that you have to over communicate. There is no substitute for that, because you're not in the office and sitting in front of your boss, sitting in front of your colleagues, sitting in front of all your extended teammates. You must over communicate, because out of sight is out of mind. That's a very true human condition. You don't want to be that. Okay. And that is a downside of working remotely. I've not seen any studies on this, but I'm sure if they're done, the rate of promotions and advancements and things like bonuses and things of that nature for work from home employees versus employees that are always present. I don't know what kind of a difference we'll see there, but I would envision that there is a little bit of a difference there. So over communicate. You must over communicate. If you think you're communicating too much, you're not communicating enough. You must over communicate with your extended team and your boss. In no uncertain terms, what you need to deliver to your organization for it to be successful, and be ruthless in obtaining that and making sure that people understand that you are delivering that. Because again, you are working remote. And I tell you, I've had salespeople that I had one salesperson that had a horse ranch in Florida, and that's where she used to work from. She was one of my largest producers ever. I didn't care. Didn't really care. She could have been on a beach in the Bahamas and done the same thing. It was irrelevant, but she's a great example. She knew she had a number, she had a quota, she knew what she had to hit, and she was ruthless about achieving that. Now, you may not be in a role where it's so black and white. Did you hit the mark? You might be in an engineering role, and you might have a different set of your deliverables might be code or some kind of other documentation or whatever it may be. Make sure that the material is of very high quality, and you're delivering it and you're making it well known that it is done per what was given as a directive. And always go back to that. If you don't have a leader that is focused, try and focus them a little bit on that. If you're working from home, that becomes really important. It really becomes much more important.
Yeah. By the way, that over communicate one, that is huge. Some companies that I've dealt with for a long time on the recruiting side of things, they're quite big and they're fully remote. And you're like, are you two talking? Because you've just said that and you've just said that. And I'm like, and you can see it, like the communication in certain remote organizations, you can see it's disjointed. I've noticed it a lot since it's become more prevalent. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I think it's massive.
And that's a skill that we will learn. I think people will learn it. I hope they learn it without pain. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Pain is a great motivator. Over communicate. Absolutely. Be out there, be in front, and let people know. And you just, whatever your product is, as a work product, make sure that is being delivered and it's being delivered well. And stick to the truth. One thing, I have never seen an instance where people have been able to get away with being less than truthful. It always comes out. Now, there's examples of folks who job shop that industry. So there's some exceptions, but that's not how you build a career normally. That's not how it's done, right?
Yeah, cool. So dedicated space, over communicate, remember out of sight, out of mind. You can't communicate enough, and just ruthlessly articulate the mission.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
How many times have you heard any SEAL team out there that got double questioned on in publicly, right? Or any of that has been brought publicly to light. You only hear about the success, and I'm sure that those teams they're given a directive and then they're out. And they are all remote.
Yeah. And, yeah. And they're super efficient.
And they're super efficient at what they do.
Yeah. Was that girl you had in the middle? Was she one of your sales team? Yeah.
She was a salesperson. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
We've had, I tell you, we've had some quirky salespeople, and again, that's a role that has got high objectivity because it's all tied to revenue. And quite frankly, I don't want a salesperson in the office, because if they're in the office, then they're obviously not doing their job. Unless they're an SDR, they're an inside salesperson. Totally different role. But if they're an outside account exec, you don't want to see them in the office. They should be with your customers.
Definitely. We've mentioned a few books there. We'll get them in the show notes. We've given loads of information there. Is there any kind of final thoughts for business owners or people coming through or people about to start out? You've given loads, but any kind of final thoughts to leave the listeners with as we come to the end here?
Yeah, don't make decisions out of fear. If you're contemplating doing this, know it's going to be a hard journey, but it'll be very fulfilling. And no matter the outcome, you're going to walk away a much better person for it. If that sounds enticing and you want to bet on yourself, that is what you're doing. You want to bet on yourself, then by all means, step into the ring. I don't think we have enough entrepreneurs. It's a totally crazy group of people, and they drive a lot in societies.
Thank you, my friend. It's really nice to get a proper insight, because especially with social media these days, everything always just looks so rosy and perfect, and I know it's not. And you can look at people that are really senior in organizations or running organizations and think, oh God, it's all right for him, it's all right for her. But I know that's not the reality, and I know that success isn't linear, and I know it involves huge levels of resilience and a dynamite mindset, and you've really got into that. So thank you, mate. It's been really nice.
Thank you for having me, Thomas. I hope I didn't ramble on too much. It was a pleasure to be here.
It's been good. I'll see you soon, my friend. Thanks for your time.
Take care.